So I've been using the DJI Lito X1 for around about 4 months now, and to be honest with you, I've changed my mind about it. Not because I've discovered anything wrong with it, in fact it's quite the opposite. There's one thing about this drone that I completely underestimated when I first started using it, and strangely it's got nothing to do with the camera, nothing to do with the LiDAR, the obstacle avoidance or even the price. But I'm going to come back to that at the end of the video because it's actually the biggest reason why I would recommend the Lito X1 today. But for me, 4 months is also long enough for some of those little annoyances to start showing themselves. And again, I found a few. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at exactly what I like about living with the Lito X1, what I haven't, how the camera works, how the batteries performed in the real world, and ultimately, would I still buy it today? So if it's your first time here, my name's Andrew, and on this channel, I generally test drones, look at features that I think actually matters, and hopefully help you get most out of them. And just so you know from the start, the video isn't sponsored by DJI. Everything I say is purely my own opinion. So 4 months later on, you're asking yourself, is the Lito really as good as I thought it was at the beginning? Well, firstly, the biggest compliment I can give the Lito is after 4 months, it doesn't feel like a cheap drone. And I don't mean the physical build of the actual drone. I mean the actual overall experience of using it. Now, normally when you buy towards the cheaper end of a product range, you're constantly reminded where the manufacturer has tried to save money. And you find that features are missing, maybe the camera's not quite good enough, the transmission isn't quite as reliable, or some of the safety features have been cut out. But I haven't really felt that with the Lito X1. Now, obviously, DJI haven't given it absolutely everything like they have with some of the other drones, and I'll come on to some of those compromises later. But some of the most important things are still on the drone. So you've still got 4K at 60 FPS, you've got slow motion at 4K 100 FPS, you've got omnidirectional obstacle sensing, you've got that forward facing LiDAR, you've got active track 360, dynamic home point, advanced return to home, the intelligent flight modes, 10-bit D-Log-M, waypoints, cruise control, surprisingly good camera. So basically, there's an awful lot of drone for the money. And I think that's important because 4 months later on, I'm no longer looking through the menus thinking about how many features DJI have actually managed to squeeze into it. I'm just basically using them, and that's a completely different thing. And next, I'm going to talk about size and portability. And one of the things I've appreciated more as time's gone on is simply how easy it is to take the Lito X1 with me. Now, with a standard battery, it's around that all-important 249 gram mark. It's small, it folds down, so it doesn't take up much room. And I think portability is easily overlooked when you're comparing drones. The Neo 2 is great for its size, but it is actually double the size of the Lito X1. Now, people spend a lot of time talking about sensors, resolution, flight time and transmission systems, but none of that really matters if the drone is sitting at home. And sometimes the best drone is simply the one that you actually bother taking with you. And that's where the Lito X1 works really well. And if I'm going somewhere where there's even a chance I might want to take some proper aerial footage and not just taking selfies, taking this drone isn't really much of a decision. I use it a lot more than I do my Mini 5 Pro. Put the drone, the controller, a couple of batteries in the bag, and really you're done for the day. And after 4 months, that's become much more important to me than when I first looked at all the specifications. It's also one of the reasons I think it works so well as a first drone, because it's not intimidating, but at the same time it doesn't immediately feel like something you're going to be outgrowing 6 months later on. And that's going to bring me on to the camera. Now, the Lito X1 does use a 1/1.3-inch CMOS sensor. It can shoot at 4K up to 60 frames a second in normal video modes, and 4K at 100 frames a second is available for slow motion. Now, you've also got 10-bit D-Log-M, and those specifications do sound really great when it was launched. But 4 months later, I'm actually less interested in the specifications. The question I think that matters more is, am I happy with the footage when I get home? Because it's very easy to sit back looking at 2 specification sheets and decide one camera must be better than the other. But when I've actually been out flying, come home, put the footage onto the computer and started editing it, I've been happy, or very happy in fact, with the footage I'm getting from the Lito X1. And that's what ultimately matters. There's plenty of detail, the colours are good, the dynamic range is surprisingly good, and the footage gives you enough flexibility to do something with it afterwards. If you don't want to colour grade, normal mode gives you footage that's basically ready to use. But if you do want a little more control, D-Log-M gives you considerably more flexibility. And that's something I've come to appreciate more and more over time, because if you're buying one as your first drone, you don't really need to know anything about D-Log-M. Just leave it in normal, learn to fly, learn composition, learn how to move the drone smoothly, and perhaps 6 months later on you can decide then if you want to start using colour grading. You don't need another drone because the compatibility is already there. And having pushed the Lito X1 footage further with colour grading and still being very happy with the results, I do think it is a fantastic little drone. Now obviously there's a relatively small sensor. It's not the 1-inch sensor of the Mini 5 Pro. But for the size and price, I think the camera is excellent. And more importantly, I've never really felt as if the camera has stopped me getting the shots that I want. And then you have safety and confidence. And strangely, I don't think the camera is the main reason I'd recommend the Lito X1 to somebody who's buying their first proper drone. I think it's more the safety features. Now, you've got obstacle sensing around the aircraft along with a forward-facing LiDAR. And no obstacle avoidance system should ever be treated as crash-proof. Thin branches, cables, small objects can still cause problems, but you still have to fly the drone. But what I've noticed over time is that all those small safety features change how relaxed you feel when you are flying. You're not constantly worrying that one movement is going to put the drone into a tree. You can concentrate more on framing the shot and where you're actually flying. And for somebody learning, I think that's incredibly important. Now, I've also found that the Lito X1 can be quite cautious when it's tracking, and occasionally perhaps too cautious. But I'd much rather that it stopped because it wasn't happy with a gap than confidently attempt something that it couldn't manage. And that's something that also came through in the last few months. The Lito X1 was noticeably cautious around trees and sometimes refused to manoeuvre rather than taking the risk. And again, personally, I think that's a positive. I'd rather have the shot ruined than the actual drone. And then you've got Active Track 360. And Active Track is one of those features that makes the Lito X1 feel considerably more expensive than it is. Select yourself, a vehicle or any supported object, and the drone can automatically maintain that position while following the subject. You can move the position of the drone around the subject as well, so you're not limited simply to following from behind. And if you want to film yourself walk, cycle or do anything where effectively you're both the camera operator and the person being filmed, it is incredibly useful. Add to that the dynamic home point and you've got yourself a very capable tracking setup. And rather than always relying on the original takeoff point, the home point can be updated as you move. And that's particularly useful when you're tracking and you're moving away from where you originally launched. And again, these features I wouldn't necessarily expect to see positioned on entry-level drones. And after 4 months, I don't really think of them as individual features anymore. They're simply part of the Lito X1. And that's actually getting very close to the thing that's changed my opinion of this drone. And if this video has helped you decide whether or not the Lito X1 is right for you, give it a like. And if you've got the Lito X1 yourself, let me know in the comments below how you're getting on with it. I'd be particularly interested to know whether or not you found anything that started to annoy you after the first few months. And also, if you enjoy this sort of real-world drone content, if you could consider subscribing. As I mentioned earlier, I'm not sponsored by DJI, so subscribing does genuinely help me continue making independent videos like this. And if you would like to support the channel a little further, there's also an option for Buy Me a Coffee in the link up here, which you can scan with a QR code. Now, after 4 months, I have found a few things I don't particularly like. And the first one is the vertical video. Now, the Lito X1 can produce vertical video up to 2.7K at 60 frames a second. And for Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts or similar platforms, that's probably going to be enough for most people. But the problem is how it gets there. The camera doesn't physically rotate into the portrait orientation. Instead, you are getting a cropped view from the sensor. This means that you're not using the full sensor area in the same way you would with cameras that have a gimbal that physically rotates. And more importantly for me, you have less flexibility afterwards if you want to crop or reframe the image. Is it a deal breaker? Absolutely not, but I do tend to use the framing guides on the screen for 9:16 just in case. But if the vertical content is one of the main reasons you buy in the drone, you maybe want to look at something else like the Mini 5 Pro. My next negative is going to be the hyperlapse, and this one is more frustrating than some of the others. The Lito X1 has some excellent intelligent shooting modes, but the hyperlapse output is limited to 1080p rather than 4K. Now on a phone that's probably not going to bother anybody very much, but if you're dropping that footage into a 4K YouTube project, you're not going to have the same flexibility. And it's one of those little limitations that remind you that this isn't one of DJI's more expensive drones. Again, would it stop me buying it? And the answer is no. And then my third criticism is going to be towards the gimbal upward range. You've got plenty of downward movement, including looking straight down, but the controllability upward tilt is limited to 40 degrees. And again, for most flyers, that's going to be perfectly adequate. But there are times when you're flying towards a building or trees or some other landscape feature where being able to look further up creates a completely different shot. It's probably something a beginner wouldn't notice, but once you start becoming more creative with the drone, you might pick up on this. Then the penultimate one is to do with photography. Now the Lito X1 can produce really good photos. You've got 12 or 48 megapixel options, and RAW is available if you want to properly process your images afterwards. But there are a few limitations compared with some of DJI's more expensive drones. Bracketing is a little limited to only 5 photos, and I would have liked 7. And there's no dedicated vertical crop photo mode either, so remember to shoot in 4:3 to get the maximum flexibility. Of course, you can take a normal photograph and crop it vertically afterwards. It's hardly the end of the world, but it is just a little bit more hassle. But considering DJI already produce a vertical crop for video, it would be nice to have something that is similar for photographs. And my final gripe is that there's no course lock mode unless you're in hyperlapse. Now I know you've got cruise control, but being able to rotate the drone whilst maintaining a set course would be a nice touch as well. So basically those 5 are my main negatives on the Lito X1. And importantly, none of those would stop me buying the drone itself. So next I'm going to talk about the battery life, and you do get up to 36 minutes. But I wouldn't expect to get 36 minutes every time you fly. And I certainly wouldn't plan a flight around it. What's interesting is just how much real world flight time can vary. I tend basically to get around about 25 minutes, but in stronger winds that could be brought down to roughly 18 to 22 minutes. And that shows why the maximum flight time should really be treated as a comparison figure rather than promises. Wind like it is today, temperature, speed and how you fly all make a difference. But overall, I think the battery life is pretty good. And more importantly, with several batteries, like you get in some of the combos, I don't feel as though I have to rush. I can get the drone into position, look at the composition, change it, try something else, wait for the light, and actually think about the footage rather than constantly watching the battery percentage. Now that may not look very exciting on the specification sheet, but when you've lived with the drone for 4 months, it does actually matter. And living with the drone is probably the area where my opinion has changed the most. There are lots of little things I like about the Lito X1 that didn't seem particularly important when I first started using it. But after 4 months, they all add up. The 42 gigabytes of internal storage is a perfect example of that. When I first saw that specification, I thought, yeah, that's going to be nice to have, but now I think it's absolutely brilliant, because sooner or later you are going to leave the house and you're going to forget your memory card. And discovering that when you've driven somewhere specifically to fly the drone is extremely annoying. With that 42 gigabytes built into the drone, you can simply carry on filming. Having a good amount of internal storage is important, and I can understand why. And then you've got the small size and the fact that you're not constantly worrying about the camera being good enough. And then there's the reliability of the whole thing. None of those individual things would make me buy the drone, but if you put them together, they make the drone considerably nicer to own. And that's something you don't really discover when you watch a 2-day review. Now the same thing applies to the RC2, and you certainly don't need an RC2 to enjoy the Lito X1. But having a screen built into the controller just removes another little bit of hassle. There's no attaching your phone, there's no cable, there's no notifications appearing on the DJI Fly app. You turn the controller on, turn the drone on, and basically you're ready. It doesn't make the drone fly any better, and it certainly doesn't improve the camera, but it does make me more likely to get the drone out and use it. And after 4 months, I've realised that convenience is far more important than I thought it would be. And I think this is where the 4-month review becomes different from a normal review. Because when something first arrives, you just want to test everything. You go through the menus, you test every intelligent flight mode, you test the camera, you test the obstacle avoidance, you look at the specifications. 4 months later on, you don't do that. You just decide which drone you're taking. And personally, I think that's a much better test. Because if you have to convince yourself to take a particular drone, eventually you're going to stop taking it. If it's too big, it stays at home. If the batteries are annoying and don't last, it stays at home. If you don't trust the camera, it stays at home. If getting everything set up is a nuisance, the drone is going to stay at home. The Lito X1 really gives me none of those excuses. And that's why I find myself looking at it less and less as something I'm testing and more as something I can simply pick up and use. So after 4 months, would I really recommend you to buy the Lito X1? Well, I think the answer for that is obvious. So after 4 months, who do I think should buy the Lito X1? And the obvious answer is beginners. And I think it's one of the strongest options for someone who's just beginning to fly with a first proper camera drone. It's small, it's relatively affordable, it's easy to fly, it's got excellent safety features, the camera's good, there's enough capability built into it that you're unlikely to outgrow it immediately, and that's really important because you're not buying a drone that only makes sense while you're learning. As your flying improves, you've still got active track, D-Log-M, you've got raw photography, you've got the safety systems, and there's plenty to grow into. But I don't think it's only a beginner's drone. I also see some very good arguments for someone who already owns a more expensive drone buying the Lito X1 as a second drone. Something small you can put in a bag, something you can take on holiday, or simply something you can take when you don't particularly want to carry or risk something more expensive. So for me, I wouldn't consider the Lito X1 as only a beginner option, but really it's a capable lightweight backup or travel drone. Which finally brings me back to what I said at the beginning. I said there was one thing about the Lito X1 that completely I underestimated when I first started using it. After 4 months, it's probably become the thing I like about the drone the most. And it's how little I have to think about the drone itself. It's small enough that I don't have to think twice about taking it with me. The batteries give me enough time, so I'm not constantly rushing. The obstacle avoidance and LiDAR give me that extra bit of confidence, and the active track works extremely well. I've also got the 42 gigabytes of internal storage in case I've forgotten the memory card. The camera is good enough that I'm not getting home looking at the footage and wish I'd taken something else. The RC2 means I can set everything up and get everything running quickly, and all those little things really matter. So the Lito X1 basically gets out of the way and lets me concentrate on getting the shot. And that's something that you really discover not from a specification sheet. You discover it after using the drone for a few months. When the novelty's disappeared, when you stop testing it, and it simply becomes another piece of equipment that you pick up and use. And that's what surprised me most about the Lito X1. When it launched, I thought DJI had made a very good beginner's drone. But 4 months later, I've changed my mind. I think they've simply made a very good drone. It just happens to be affordable and beginner friendly as well. And for me, that's probably the biggest compliment I can give this drone. So was the DJI Lito X1 overhyped when it was launched? No, I don't think it was. It's not perfect. I'd like the vertical shooting. I'd like 4K hyperlapse. I'd like more upward gimbal movement. And I'd like DJI to give us a few more photography options. And of course, the course log option. But look at what you are getting rather than what you're missing. You've got the 1/1.3 inch sensor. You've got very good 4K video. You've got 10-bit D-Log-M, 4K slow motion, active track 360, omnidirectional sensing, forward-facing LiDAR, dynamic home point, advanced return to home, 42 gigabytes of internal storage, waypoints, cruise control, and real good battery life. And to be honest with you, that's quite a package. And after 4 months, the thing that's really impressed me the most is simplicity and how few compromises I have to actually make when I'm using the drone. So 4 months later on, I would still happily recommend the Lito X1, especially if you're buying your first proper camera drone and want something you can learn with, but also importantly, something you can grow into. But I am interested to know what you think. If you've owned a Lito X1 for a few months, has your opinion changed? What's been your biggest surprise? Is there anything that started to annoy you or something that I've completely missed about the drone itself? Let me know in the comments below. If you found the video useful, if you could give it a like and consider subscribing for more Lito X1 tips, tutorials and drone reviews. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, as I said earlier, there is the option there for buy me a coffee, and any assistance for that would be greatly appreciated, or you can check out the description in the link below. So thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next video. Bye.